Hello and welcome. This video is for all of you who are struggling to recover from a deep heartbreak or narcissistic abuse, and the grief just feels like way too much. Maybe you feel like it'll never be okay again, that life might never feel warm and good again, and maybe it feels like this is forever. It's totally normal and okay to feel these things. And I want this video to be an encouragement for you. I felt like that a lot. I felt like the sense of hopelessness and a grief and a pain and a heartbreak so deep that I just didn't trust life at all again. So if you're there, this video is for you. Or if you have a friend that's there, you can feel free to pass this one along. It could help. I'm going to share some blessings that can come about after these experiences of heartbreak or betrayal or narcissistic abuse. Now, I'm not saying to look at these things that have happened that have been painful as a good thing. I'm not talking about spiritual bypassing here at all. However, what I am saying is that you actually have the power to alchemize these experiences into blessings, because in them there is a seed of potential for growth and greater capacity, for more awareness and higher discernment that can benefit you more in all of your relationships, including your relationship with yourself further on down the road in your life. Now, I want to say that if you are in the beginning phases of recovery or heartbreak, don't focus on this too hard right now. What is most important is to be with your grief. And if you are coming out of an abusive experience, you really need to be with that part of yourself that was victimized and acknowledge that part, be with that part, hold your grief, validate your own experience. You don't need to be feeling like you have to take responsibility to turn this all into, a bowl of cherries or a bed of roses, because it's not. Wherever you are in your journey, being aware of these things can help you at some point gain more wisdom, more strength, more agency, and more trust in yourself moving forward in life. And that's where the real healing is. For those who don't know me, I am also a painter. That's why I chose this backdrop for today's video. I was working on this piece during a really challenging time in my life. I was experiencing a lot of depression, and turned out there was the second affair was happening, which I didn't know about. I mean, I had suspicions, I knew in my body, but I didn't know cognitively yet that this was taking place. But this painting was my lifeline, and it's called The Blessing. It ended up being kind of a profound thing to have come through during such a difficult time. When the final affair was happening, which created the fallout on one of the most painful relationships I've had in my life. But meanwhile, I was doing this piece called The Blessing, and it's a very angelic presence. It's like it's holding you. I'm going to show you. Kind of drips down. Oh, there's my notes. Into this star, right? This little star at the bottom. And it's like this gift. And a lot of times when we go through these experiences, they're so incredibly excruciating for so long, and it breaks our spirit, it breaks our mind. It can have really immense and intense physical effects as well, and we don't know how we're ever going to get out of it, if we're ever going to be okay again. And that's real. And also, yes, we will be okay again, and sometimes we can emerge stronger and more of ourselves than ever before. We might always walk with a little bit of a limp, and that's okay. Some of the areas of our life that have needed, to be adjusted into more awareness or maturity or kind of grounded in reality do get worked on in these experiences, and we can use them for our benefit. In no way am I saying that you need to thank the person who broke your heart or that you need to give them the praise for abusing you at all. I do not agree with people that say like, oh, you need to thank this person for hurting you. No, you can thank yourself for taking that big pile of shit and gardening your own flowers into it, right? A lot of other things need to happen before that can become a beautiful thing. And so that's up to you to use that in a way that benefits you down the road. Okay, so the first positive thing that can come out of these experiences is that you learn more discernment. Usually when we get into these experiences, we're a little bit too trusting. Sometimes that loss of innocence feels so devastating when we experience a big betrayal, or when someone turns on us and we end up experiencing, years or, months of narcissistic abuse. That can feel like the world just changed from this bright, shiny, beautiful place into a really dark and scary one. However, this can be a really potent initiation because we're not really supposed to trust everybody. You usually trust people once they earn it. A lot of times when we are children, we have to hold this implicit trust to our caregivers and the people around us because that's what inherently makes us feel safe. Now, a lot of times these people aren't really trustworthy, but because we want to feel safe, we will trick ourselves into trusting them. Like, oh, well, I know that they're doing this thing that's really scary, but they're supposed to be the person who looks after me, so I have to trust them. That can set us up down the road where everyone we encounter, we want to trust them and be really open and compassionate and welcoming. And it's such a beautiful way to live and to be, and I get that. I used to be that person, and it also leaves that inner vulnerable child very vulnerable to people who would take advantage of that. Usually narcissistic and advantageous people seek out those incredibly kind and overly caring, overly giving, overly forgiving souls to latch onto. They're easy prey. They will forgive them. They know that they can get away with abusive behavior for a lot longer than a person who has better discernment, has stronger boundaries. So even though it feels like you've lost this really beautiful and pure part of yourself, it's actually a good thing as you grow up, because then you can actually protect that pure, innocent, open-hearted part of yourself by reparenting and becoming more discerning and actually having really strong boundaries and protecting that part of yourself from people like that, because now your eyes are open. Kind of sucks. It's not the funnest thing to see at all, but it will keep you much more safe. And that discernment is a gift. It's an initiation into, a deeper maturation process. So if you can, try to reframe it as a gift and as a blessing. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but later on down the line, it'll start to feel really good. The second blessing that comes from these experiences is that you readjust your levels of trust to a more realistic one. So piggybacking on what I had just said, our trust levels change. We're not as open and as wide-hearted as we used to be. We understand human nature more, and we understand the nature of certain humans who might not think or act like us. Some people are afflicted with NPD or other cluster B personality disorders. They just don't operate in the same way. A lot of times we make the mistake in assuming that other people operate the same way we do. So we think that if we are extra open, extra compassionate, extra loving, extra forgiving, then these people will be able to recognize their harm and adjust accordingly. Maybe we would do that, maybe not, but people who are highly antagonistic actually take that as permission to continue operating in an abusive way. And once we realize this, we can have more of a realistic approach to who and how we trust and the expectations that we have on people. Because really, you just don't know unless you've known someone for a long time. Also, reputations are very important. You know, how has this person showed up in all of the relationships before you? Knowing these things will give you a better idea of what to expect in your own dynamic with them. The third good thing that can happen from these painful experiences is that it's a great opportunity to re-examine, rediscover, and really get into the childhood wounding and the experiences that you had back then that created this codependent, people-pleasing, overgiving, maybe even a savior complex that was allowed you to be attracted to and to attract narcissistic or advantageous people in the first place. Most often when we do this as adults, we were trained to do this as children. When our boundaries didn't matter as children, when we experienced abandonment or neglect or just inconsistent love and care from the people in our lives when we were very young, it sets us up to expect that and to seek that in the future. Our nervous systems are comfortable with what is familiar. Family, familiar. We were used to it. That registers as safe in our systems. Anything outside of that registers as unfamiliar, unknown, which makes us feel uneasy and unsafe, even if that new terrain is actually better and safer for us. Our initial reaction to it is going to be with discomfort and unease. Basic psychology and adulthood, if you have childhood wounds or problems that you're trying to solve, like trying to win the love of your parent or a certain caregiver, that stays on loop in your subconscious, and you're constantly trying to find closure through your adult relationships, especially your romantic ones. It's weird. I know, it's not that sexy. But anyway, if you grew up in these kinds of environments, you'll probably find yourself seeking love from difficult people, from very wounded people, from unavailable people, from people who are just challenging or challenged or like really hurt. Like they have these amazing gifts and qualities, but they also have this sense of like brokenness inside. And if we've come from that, we feel often a little bit of that ourselves. And usually instead of focusing on our own internal feelings of brokenness and our unmet needs and learning how to comfort ourselves, we will look at this other person who displays these qualities and try to rush in and save them. So we end up with a savior complex. Usually that's going on both sides. That person's trying to save us, we're trying to save them, we're trying to get our needs met and fuel from the other person. So narcissistic people, we know they need fuel and validation from the other in order to feel okay. We don't usually talk about is that codependent people, empathic people are also getting their needs met and their validation from the other person. So they're both using each other as fuel. Neither of them are centered in the self. Neither of them are self-sourced. Now, one comes across as way more overtly abusive, and the other one seems more genuinely good intended, but there's a covert manipulation going on there as well. So they're both out of balance, and as the more codependent person who keeps bringing these narcissistic or difficult people in your life so that you can continue to play out this role. Like it's not helping you in any way. Like you might be getting a certain need met on a storyline that, you know, like if I can save this person or if this difficult person will finally turn around and love me, then I'll experience that love, like I'll be worthy. This is usually the case if you have a parent or a caregiver that you really idealized as a young child and they were never quite there for you and you always felt like you were fighting for their love. That's going to loop in your subconscious and you're going to continue trying to play that out until you do actually get a difficult person that was just like them to love you. Now, it never works. The only way out of that is to show up for yourself in that way and not rely on someone externally to do that. And that's the cycle that we get to break and the aftermath of these experiences. Because usually what you just went through was so bad, you don't ever want to experience that ever again. When I went through it, I was like, I need to be by myself. I don't want to date anybody. I'm staying single till I figure this out, because no, thank you. Not interested in ever experiencing that again. So I turned it into a beautiful gift to dig in to all of my stuff and to find out like why I was attracting this kind of person. Why was I attracted to this kind of person? Why did I think a part of me deserved that kind of treatment? It was familiar to me from when I was young. When you come out of that and you bring yourself back together and you become more intact and you understand your worth and who you really are, your value, what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate, because you do love yourself, things change in a really profound and beautiful way. Which leads me to the fourth beautiful thing that can happen after these relationships, is that you get to re-examine your core values, your self-concept, the subconscious and conscious beliefs that you hold about yourself that are dictating your behaviors and how you show up in life, how you show up for yourself and how you show up for others. Listening deeply to ourselves and closely examining our beliefs about ourselves, what we were taught to believe, what beliefs we internalize from others, what has stuck in our consciousness about ourselves, what we deserve, who we are, what we're worthy or capable of. So much information has come externally into our systems, and a lot of it we will hold on to and believe and turn that into our identity. In the aftermath of a relationship with a narcissistic or antagonistic person, probably going to feel pretty bad about yourself. These people, they operate in a way where getting you to feel bad about yourself is what makes them feel better about themselves. I had a therapist once tell me that narcissism is internalized shame. And when someone has that much internalized shame, they have to dump it into another person's system to feel relief. Now, if you are in a relationship with a narcissist, you're more open, you're more empathic, you're easily swayed by other people's opinions and thoughts of you. You are, an open vessel for that. And when you end up being filled with so much of this person's negative ideologies or toxic shame, verbal abuse, and you've taken that into your system, your self-concept is destroyed. And you literally think you are, a piece of crap human and that you deserve the treatment that you're getting. Otherwise, you would probably leave. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with that person in the first place because you saw it. But since you have a subconscious belief that that's somehow all you're going to get, or you have to settle for something, you did. Pulling the plug on the toxic beliefs that this narcissistic person had you accepting about yourself, and going through a process of rediscovery, reconnection, remembrance of who you were before you met this person and who you actually are, is going to do wonders in your life. After that happens, you are going to avoid these people like the plague. You'll sniff them out. They won't have any interest in you either, because a person who knows their worth, who truly loves themselves, who is strong, there's a little bit of a repellent. Some narcissistic people will see that as a challenge and they might try anyway, but you are going to notice the signs. And as soon as they start to belittle you, because it starts small, remember, as soon as that starts, you're not going to put up with it, because that's just not who you are anymore. The fifth good thing that can happen after these relationships is that you get a chance to rediscover yourself. A lot of times in one of these relationships, we are disconnected from the things that we loved. Maybe that person shames you. I had a person that told me that my art was selfish and that I had no idea what it was to do anything good for the rest of humanity. Meanwhile, in my paintings, I tried to put a lot of healing love in there. My intention in my artwork was to help people feel good and to take people to a deeper place that was uplifting in their heart. When that person said that to me, a part of me actually believed it. And you know why? It's because this was the person that I was supposed to trust more than anybody else. Our love bond was very strong, or what I thought was a love bond was very strong. When you were in these deep relationships, you're like, well, this person knows me better than anybody else. I should trust their opinion more than anybody else. It's not the case. In a healthy relationship, sure. But if this person is highly antagonistic, dishonest, verbally abusive, that is a difficult thing to untangle. So after a while, if you're listening to this person consistently tell you what's not okay about yourself, what you need to change, where you're wrong, where you're crazy, all of these things that you're probably getting dosed with every day, this little drips of poison. When you are out of that, you have this opportunity to just dig in and completely rediscover yourself all over again. It's painful at the beginning. You're just under a pile of rubble and you don't know up from down. You have to clean yourself off, get the dust out of your eyes, and cough up a lot of debris. But then once that is cleared, once the dust is settled, there's a beautiful process of cleaning all of that away and rediscovering the earth beneath your feet, rediscovering the bones of who you are. And usually when we're at this point, we take ourselves back with a fierceness. Like we realize what was taken from us and we want to reclaim ourselves more than anything because that loss was so great. We kind of come back into our lives with a vengeance, because sometimes, I can feel really vengeful and that's okay for a period of time. You're allowed to feel pissed off and rageful and all of that. That's actually really healthy if you've endured abuse for a long time. I wouldn't suggest acting on it, but feeling that, sure, that's fine. Don't get stuck there. That'll eat you alive. But the best vengeance is like coming back into yourself and owning yourself, like reclaiming those parts of yourself that person took from you or that person kicked out from underneath your feet. Reclaiming the parts of yourself, the things that you love, the things that you enjoy, the things that inspire you, your hobbies, your talents, maybe even the foods that you really love that person, shamed you for loving. I recommend maybe even writing down a list of the things that you used to love or used to enjoy before that person came into your life. Start trying them out again. Try new things again. You're free. This is why it's so beautiful to take at least a year on your own to rediscover who you are. Because after these relationships, we're so contorted and twisted up, and we have to twist ourselves up to these people, otherwise we get consistently punished. Now it's true, we don't have to twist ourselves up. We could just leave, yes, and also for those of us who are new to these experiences, trauma bonds are real. Usually we have no idea what's happening. It's so insidious. It's so confusing. The narcissistic way of operating, I look at it like a virus in a computer program. It's very smart. It's very insidious. There's a mind control element to it, and it's really easy to get swept into. And it's easy to get hypnotized by, and it's very slippery. Like once you see it and you try to call out, it like changes shape and turns into something that looks like you, but that it isn't. And I know this is gonna sound completely radical to people who've never experienced it before, but if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, once you unpretzel yourself and untwist yourself, and unfurl and expand and take up your own space in your own life, that's a beautiful thing. You get to rediscover who you are and your power all over again. And it's highly likely you'll find yourself reclaiming parts of yourself that were diminished from other relationships in the past that had you feeling small or belittled. Like that powerful comeback, you'll reclaim yourself from that relationship, but then also beyond it. And it can be a really beautiful thing. The sixth great thing that can happen after these is that you have a chance to reclaim your anger. Kind of just hit on that. But some of us might not have ever claimed our anger in our entire life. And these experiences, sometimes they're so horrendous that it leaves us with no other option to just feel our anger. Like, we can suppress it and try to laugh it off all day long or just go into sadness, but usually the gift behind this is that you actually finally get to feel really fucking pissed off for the first time in your life. And the beauty in anger, actually made a video about anger. I can link it below so you can watch it if you need to. It's really potent and is one of the most beautiful and powerful things that I learned in the aftermath of this experience, was how valid my anger is and what it's trying to show me, that it's trying to protect me. It's trying to make me aware of situations and people that are violating and crossing my boundaries, taking advantage of me and abusing me. Okay, so your anger is your natural protective warning mechanism. And when it goes off, it's something to listen to. We have to be very discerning on how we act in our anger. Usually, anger is what causes a lot of scary human behavior. You probably watched that with that person that you've been with, and it's been terrifying. It probably makes you not want to access your own because you don't want to be like that. There are ways of when you do access your anger in a deeper way and you become familiar with it, you start to feel safe with it. At some point you can feel a lot of anger in your body but not be reactive with it. You can actually use it as wisdom, as guidance, and move in a very clear way through it. That takes a lot of work and practice, but sometimes these situations actually allow us to feel it and not run from our anger anymore. Usually when we're running from our anger, we are avoiding signs of danger. Anger often equals danger. The seventh positive thing that can happen after these relationships is that your capacity for compassion grows and your tolerance for bullshit behavior shrinks. So a lot of times we get into trouble when our compassion towards the toxic people in our lives is unlimited. A lot of times we'll let these people trespass multiple times because we have compassion for how they grew up. We have compassion for their wounding. Like, we have compassion for the imperfection of all human beings. But there is a such thing as toxic compassion. It can go so far that we abandon ourselves and enable that behavior from that person. However, these experiences allow our compassion to expand in terms of other people who have gone through a similar thing, or compassion for ourselves expands, which is usually the place where we need to have it expand the most. Typically, when you're dealing with narcissistic abuse and you're staying in that dynamic, you're probably giving the other person the very compassion that you need to be giving yourself. Along with that, there is, the tolerance level. Like, your tolerance was probably really high in that relationship because you kept letting them do the same things, thinking they were going to change, and they didn't change. It probably got worse. So that aspect starts to diminish, which is a really good thing. You become less able to tolerate bullshit behavior from other people. And that's a good thing, because tolerating bullshit behavior only enables that behavior. And that's not going to help them in their lives. And it's definitely not going to help anybody else that they come in contact with. The eighth really cool thing that can come out of these experiences is that you get to examine your own narcissistic traits. This one can be really tricky. And if you are in the beginning phases of healing, I recommend kind of like leaving this one for a little bit later. But we all do have narcissistic traits. We all have childhood wounds, places where we are arrested in development, where we have that black and white thinking. and we act in these maladaptive ways. Every human being has that. Okay, a highly narcissistic person has a lot of that, and not only that, they are unable to look at it, they're unable to take accountability for when they are doing these things, they are unable to apologize, and even the thought of them having a narcissistic trait can be completely like crushing to their whole identity of being this perfect human being. So as you go along in this healing process, you know, and if you're watching this video, you're probably doing research on what is narcissism, how does it work, how does it function, what does it feed on, what is it all about? And in that process, you're probably identifying with some of it, like, oh, wait, I do that little thing, or, oh, I do that, but I don't do that. You know, it's a spectrum. People have different ways in which we are wounded, and we have different maladaptive ways in which we respond. So as you go through this, if you are a truly like self-aware, wanting to grow kind of person, you're going to take some of these things and be like, huh, okay, well, I can look at that because I can see a little bit of myself in this behavior. And where does that come from? Why do I do that? What kind of need am I trying to get met? Like, where was I ashamed or, you know, felt disempowered at a young age to where I feel like I have to gain power or control in this immature way by doing these more manipulative or maladaptive things to my fellow humans. Doing this is so powerful because it enables us to find the places where we feel weak and helpless and hopeless, and where we don't feel resourced in ourselves, and actually shine the light on those little shadows and be like, what do you really need? Like, what were you missing? What happened here? And usually those parts of ourselves, like, they just want to be acknowledged, they want to be held, they want to be seen, they want to be heard. So when we can go and find the root place where some of these behaviors are coming from, such a beautiful way of healing ourselves, and it heals our relationship with our lives and with the people around us, because, you know, we're not acting in these lame, immature ways. I will say, be very careful in this process, because a lot of times a narcissistic person will have gaslit you and blamed you, it's called blame shifting, for doing the exact things that they were doing. So if you're looking at just one thing that only the narcissist in your life had accused you of, but nobody else reflects that to you, put that aside. However, if you have a lot of relationships in your life where a lot of the same patterns have happened, like if there are areas where, you know, you might be a little bit over controlling, you might be a little bratty, or, you know, you might have a hard time in these certain situations over time, those are really good places to dig in and to look at, especially when people that you love and trust have given you those reflections, even though they've been hard to hear. None of us really enjoy hearing negative things about ourselves, but if we can take it as an opportunity to grow and show up in a better way, that's a really beautiful thing. We want the people who love us to be able to tell us if we're causing harm or hurting them, or if they see ways in which we can improve. We all have blind spots, and the people who truly love us are going to let us know. However, if you've been abused in a narcissistic way, there might be a lot of confusion around where your blind spots are, because you might think that you're just an insane, crazy person. You might think that your whole life is a blind spot. Take your time with this. This is something that comes later on. The ninth and the last beautiful thing that can happen from these relationships is that you can finally let go of all of that internalized shame that was dumped into your system. You understand what narcissistic abuse is. The ninth and the last thing that I'll list here, as far as a beautiful blessing that can come out of these experiences, is that you understand what this is. When we finally break the spell of narcissistic influence in our lives, we can go back and look at our past, and things might look a lot different. We might have felt burdened by someone else's narcissistic shame that they dumped on us long ago, and we had no idea what that was, and maybe we have been carrying that throughout our whole lives. And now that we see things clearly, we can let that go. There's so much unburdening that can happen, like things that we were carrying for other people that were never ours to carry. Now that we see what was really happening at play, we can release it and send it on. Another thing is that we can also recognize these dynamics in systems. They might be present in religious systems, political systems, other, like you might be seeing something like that in a workplace or like in other structures of power. These dynamics are often present in one way or another. And once you're privy to it, once you see the signs, then it's a lot easier to maintain your own autonomy and sovereignty from any dynamic that displays the same characteristics that you can recognize as narcissistic abuse. And if you have taken on shame or punishment or negative self-belief from any other organizations, religious or political, from the past, you now have the ability to forgive yourself and to free yourself of that shame as well. I hope that this was helpful and that it at least gave some spark of hope or upliftment in this challenging time that you might be going through right now. Please take your time with this. It takes a while to heal. Our brains are negatively physically affected in these dynamics, and neuroplasticity is real. Our brains can readjust back into a healthy state. It just takes a little bit of time. So be patient with yourself. Give yourself all the compassion in the world. Be gentle with yourself, especially in the very frustrating and confusing moments. And little by little, all of these things that I just talked about will reveal themselves, and you'll feel so much stronger and so much more yourself, maybe than ever before. I hope that for you. All right, sending so much love. I'll see you in the next one.